Welcome to Ready Layer 1. It's a crypto podcast that focuses on the NEAR ecosystem. And this is Who SHARDED. It's our weekly news update where we go around the NEAR and AURORA ecosystems and just keep you up to date on what's been going on. It is powered by NEAR Week.
This week on Who SHARDED, we're going to talk about the Stader Exploit. We're going to talk about wallets, more wallets, all the different wallets, dozens of wallets. We're talking a little bit about DeFi and what's kind of going on with there in the landscape there. We're talking about the next phase of sharding happening. So we'll tell you who sharding is NEAR.
Wallets. We talk about wallets.
And we're going to keep talking about more wallets on top of the wallets that we talked about before.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to highlight some kind of things that are kind of going on there. And we're going to lastly make sure we hit on some NEARCon stuff too. So it's an exciting episode.
Biggest news of the week. NEAR has its first legit exploit hack by Stader. What do you call it, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it technically is a smart contract exploit the Stader, which is liquid staking on NEAR, similar to like a meta pool. And what it is, I guess what happened was that when you transferred the NEARX, which is their token like ST NEAR, when you transfer it to yourself, it would just double it. You could just keep doubling it and doubling and doubling it. So essentially, infinitely minting NEARX for nothing.
Until they drained, then the person who did it basically did that exponentially and drained the liquidity pools.
Yeah, so then they took that and went to Refinance and to Jumbo. Both have liquidity pools there, and they went and they drained the NEAR from those liquidity pools that were paired with NEARX.
Wow.
So yeah,
that is wild. And for people who don't know, so liquid staking is like a really cool DeFi. And also, I mean, is it specifically DeFi? It's basically so you can stake your NEAR with a validator and you get the validating rewards. But then if you do that, your NEAR is locked.
Right.
So then if you do stake NEAR or like liquid staking, what you do is let's use Metapool because they're the like reputable, they've been audited, they've been around for a while, zero hacks, correct? They seem to be the more trusting one right now. You take your NEAR, you stake it with Metapool, then they give you a token back called a staked NEAR, which it's a 1-to-1. And then you can use that staked NEAR in DeFi. And that's what liquid staking is, correct? So then you can take that staked NEAR. So say you put 1,000 NEAR into Metapool, you get back whatever the same equivalent of staked NEAR would be. And it's a slight different because of how they adjust the rewards, which we can get into another time, or just tune in when we interview the Metapool team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you take that staked NEAR and you can go to like a DeFi platform, borrow against it, or do whatever you want.
Exactly. And the other key part of that is, so what Metapool is doing is they are staking that NEAR that you put in. So they're essentially still putting it into validators, they're still staking it, it's still earning rewards. That's how kind of all of that works. That's how that APR and everything comes from that, because they are earning on your NEAR that you put in. The big change there is that then you can at any time take that same NEAR, swap it back out, and they'll give you regular NEAR back, and they just take a small, tiny fee. So that's how all of those liquid providers, this is across all chains. All chains have this.
So Joe, with this exploit, you've been really involved in understanding what's going on. You've been talking with some people, and you've been bringing some info, and we've been dropping updates on our Twitter and TikTok.
Yep.
What are some key things for the audience to know that's happened, what we know, and like how this could potentially affect the chain?
So again, like, this is not a protocol hack. This is not a wallet hack. This is not this isn't even, from a Stader's standpoint, it wasn't even like that their full contract was hacked. So there was a bug in their contract regarding transfers where, again, it's that double, it just essentially is creating a infinitely double amount of whatever you transfer to yourself. It was causing problems. So what they then did was that they were only able to go and drain the liquidity pools. So they couldn't take the money that was already exchanged for St. NEAR. So if you had, I'm sorry, not NEARX. So if you have NEARX and you didn't do anything with it, you didn't put it in a liquidity pool, you're just holding it in your wallet, in theory, your exchange is still no problem because they are all of the NEAR that they are then putting into validators is still there. That was not touched. The part though that really is the problem is that if NEARX was accepted already at lenders, which it has not been yet, like Saint NEAR is, we'll call it Saint NEAR, but it's just Stake NEAR, ST NEAR. If like that, you can take like Burrow, and you can go borrow against that. Now, if NEARX was in that scenario already and set up with like Burrow, that would have caused a more rippling effect, because what happens is then is that user has infinite amount of NEARX, right? Like they make like 1 million NEARX. They go borrow against it on Burrow. And unless Burrow has some kind of trigger, which, I don't know if they have any circuit breakers, which would have maybe caught on to something like that, but they could have put it into Burrow, borrowed, let's say, USDC against it, drained that, borrowed NEAR, whatever they want. They're just borrowing everything and essentially wipe Burrow out, right? And it's with NEARX, it doesn't really have any backing to it. So that would have been the larger issue, but that didn't happen, and it couldn't happen because NEARX was so new. And that's the one thing I think we kind of all got lucky with, is that it could have brought down the larger ecosystem with that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the point in the show where it's like, not financial advice. Web3 decentralized finance is extremely risky. And when people always say we're early, oh no, we are way early. I mean, this Stader was like just connected to 2 things. Like, it had just launched, right? Like,
yeah, it was new. I mean, and they were just trying to get some promotions out. Now, I think the problem here is, like, and this is the discussion that, people are kind of sidestepping around a lot, but like you and I have been harping on this a little bit here and there, especially like on Twitter. But the problem that I see here is that, like, they were not transparent ahead of time. Yep. Right? Like, so again, the Web3 and decentralized finance is supposed to be about open and transparency. And what's happening instead with some of these, where we're seeing especially hacks, whether it was like Slope on Solana, or it's now, Stader here on NEAR, is that they were not open sourced. They didn't have a real published audit. The audit that they did have is not from a reputable group. Yeah. The more reputable group one, they hadn't published yet. And it's like, okay, this is where, as maybe the Web3 community needs to step up and say, like, you can't be part of the ecosystem if you're not meeting some basic needs. I get the idea of like permissionless and everyone, it's open, you should be able to do that stuff. But like, if you're going to go and be able to do that, like, you need to be audited, you need to be open source, like, you need to have the ability to people really see this, because this kind of bug should have been caught.
Yeah.
Like, a proper auditing company catches this bug. Like, this isn't some like super complex hack, and like, this isn't some like sophisticated attack. This is like basic stuff. And that's what worries me about the larger landscape of everything, of like, well, you don't want regulation per se, but there's got to be some level of standards. And I would bet that this situation makes groups like a Ref Finance go back and rethink, maybe we have to change how we evaluate who comes onto our platform.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a hard sort of problem to solve, because so true decentralization is basically like open source, like no one controls anything. Let me rephrase that. That's not what, but you know what I mean? Like, but how do you, like, do you have full decentralization or full centralization, right? And some of these companies want to be in a decentralized place, but act like a centralized company. And I think that has been a big issue. And like, can we just like, is there some way to like self-govern, right? Does that make sense? Like, is there some way that like, instead of like Ref Finance or some entity prohibiting Stader from doing their thing, it's more like, okay, here's a a source, go there. Stader doesn't have any of the approvals, like badges or whatever it is, and then it's like, okay, I'm not putting my money on there. I'm not putting any NEAR on there because they don't have a true audit, and the audit they do have is from some like hack company. No.
Yeah, I mean, look, so there is a mindset shift that I think is still happening on all levels, from user to company to protocol, of like what the world is today and what the world is going to.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of that for companies is like, oh, I have this proprietary thing and I got to keep it safe. And, you know, everyone's going to sign NDAs or we're not sharing anything with anybody. But like, really, like, unless you are truly doing something that is absolutely unique and, you know, you really can prove that like this is intellectual property that you just don't want to open source, then otherwise you got to be open sourcing your code. Like there's no reason not to, especially like liquids. I mean, again, like this was not stuff that was super complicated. It's been done. On top of that, if you then are going to stay closed source and you have a good reason for that, then you need like rock solid auditing, and you need to be very public about what your auditing was, what they found, how you remediated it, because that doesn't show your IP. I've been through extraordinarily extensive you know, of audits, you know, on all different levels for different software, and I will tell you, like, you can publish your audit without giving away your IP if that's what you're concerned about. So they got to go and do that. Like that's the stuff, and that's now for me, like part of my like investing manifesto is now going to be like, let me see your audits, you know, and I need to know that.
This is a great question I want to ask you, and you just what is your DeFi investing manifesto?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's ever changing right now because we're, you know, but I will say, like, you know, never use anything that is like beta or just launched.
Correct.
You know,
never go beta.
Yeah, don't go beta. Don't go with just launched. You know, you want it to be established. It's got to be audited by a reputed. Yeah, that's the wrong word. It needs to be audited by a respected company that has done other audits in that space before. Just because they're a software auditing company does not mean they understand crypto or anything else. Or even if they maybe have done other chains, doesn't mean they understand the chain you're working on. So make sure it's a company that's done that. Then I also want to be able to see is what is actually the backing behind what they're doing. Do they have the funds? Do they have a setup to be able to support if something were to go wrong? Can they remediate as best as possible for what they have there? And those things are kind of those steps. Then lastly, you know, it goes back to of what do you then do secondarily with whatever you did on DeFi? So if I stake something, am I then going and borrowing against that? You know, like where does my money trail end? And what am I actually holding in my wallet that I own and control versus what I'm letting somebody else control? And do I feel comfortable with that? And that's the thing you have to look at. If I put it in, let's say $10,000 worth of X as collateral, and so now I'm holding, let's say, $7,000 of that.
That's too risky.
Right. That's what collateralized loans are on DeFi, right? So it's at maybe that 70 to 85%. So am I okay if something happens to that $3,000 difference? Does that crush me? If that crushes me, then I can't do that borrowing. I gotta hold the original token. If I can do that and I can make other plays and I feel comfortable of worst case scenario, I lose that. Okay. Now it then comes back to if it's been audited, if it's been trusted, it's being used, that $3,000 difference is probably safe.
Yeah.
So I can then make choices from there. But you have to evaluate your own risk and where the actual last bit of tokens stands.
I do think that it's tricky because we play in Web3 a lot, And when you start playing Web3, you there isn't a true decentralized Web3 yet. So you still are touch points with lots of Web2. So it can be this false sense of security, like Web2 still exists when you're in Web3. So like, when I go to Vanguard or Fidelity or any other investing platform, that's Web2. That's centralized. There's rules, laws around that. There's government. People go to jail. Not most people, but where in crypto, it may look like a really beautiful UX UI dashboard. And you might be thinking, oh, I'm just staking some tokens, just like I'm staking a stock. No. It is a whole different mindset, risk tolerance. And I think one thing I would add to the manifesto, which I think all your points were great, is my third one, or my addition is diversify. Because if you're ever too much in one platform, I mean, these things, even great ones like hacks, bugs, so many things. So just be really cautious out there, and not financial advice.
No, I mean, it's, and that's why I say, like, you have to evaluate your own risk, and find your own risk profile. And I just want to piggyback on one thing you just said about Web2, and then we can move on. But I think people often also forget how much or how many checks and balances that even include humans are in actually Web2. Because when you when you try to pull out money out of like your Vanguard account, that goes by somebody's desk. That is not fully automated. That is not just a computer. That's not just some smart contract. So that's why there is that other level of, someone could call it safety. I mean, we'll put safety in big words, but but there is that other thing. And so you can feel more comfortable. Like, someone can't just exploit the Vanguard system because of the way it's structured. When you peel away all of that and there is no more middleman, you have to understand that the technology is only as good as the person who wrote it.
I agree.
Right? It's still humans writing all of this. It is that's why you have audits, and so, you got to pay attention to all that.
Yeah, Joe, that's some really good stuff. And of course, we'll keep people updated as more info comes out and all that stuff.
100%.
All right, so let's move on. Something, it's the season of wallets, people, and I'm bringing it up again because now there are over 30 different wallets on NEAR. Is that too many wallets? I'm starting to get like the paradox of choice where I just want like one. I want all 30 of these wallets to collectively get together and be like, all right, let's make the ultimate wallet that's secure and everything. Joe, what do you think about this? And is there any benefit to having 30 plus wallets?
Well, as a user, no. I mean, as a user, you don't want 30 wallets, but pick a couple that you like. But it's important to remember, and like, it's a cheesy saying now in crypto. It's like, oh, we're early. But like, NEAR is really actually very early. Like, right? Like, think about when mainnet launched just last year, and think about like where it is today. This is still a new frontier. So yes, you have 30 plus wallets showing up, and by the end of the calendar year, it might be at 40, right? 50. Jeez. That's okay, in the sense that you can jump around between anyone you want, right? The way, again, NEAR handles their keys, it should never be an issue that you have to worry about like losing your human readable name, right? So if I was lucky enough to have joe.near, which I don't, but if I did, if that were the case and I wanted to go to a different wallet, like, that shouldn't make a difference. I should be able to switch around. What it does, though, is we're going to find some winners. Like, I would be shocked if this time next year there's still 30 wallets really actively being used, right? Like, you're going to see 3 or 4 maybe really get to the forefront, and one of those could be one that doesn't even exist today, right? So I mean, it's fine for choice. People are going to figure out what they want, but the best thing that's coming out of all of this is what NEAR is focusing on is the wallet selector.
Yeah. So what is the wallet selector? So I've seen it popping up now. So like when you're about to click into like one of the dApps, which if people don't know a whole lot about NEAR, what's really cool about it is you go around on the web, you could go onto the website and it'll say like connect wallet here, and you use your NEAR wallet to get into there, right? So you basically carry your keys with you. And it used to just connect you. Now a little box comes up and has some squares, and that's the wallet selector, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So what is it? How does it work? And can it hold all 30 wallets?
Yeah,
And is there somebody looking at these wallets in the wallet selector?
yes. So the wallet selector isn't like, so not just, there is a little bit of a checks and balance. Like anyone can submit their wallet to be part of the wallet selector.
Okay.
So but there is a little bit of checks and balance because the wallet selector is going to be still run by the NEAR Foundation. They are providing that piece. And so you can make an assumption, I could be wrong, but an assumption that in order to say, hey, I want to add it to it, that there is some minimal vetting, at least, I would assume, maybe more. But what it does is, so it, when instead of hitting login and instantly going to the current web wallet, it will give you a selector and you can pick whichever one you want, whether it's a mobile wallet, an extension, or a web wallet. You could go between those. And what's so nice, and again, other chains have similar things to this, but what NEAR's trying to do is trying to make the default always be the wallet selector, number one, so that way you have that opportunity. But number two, that because of the web wallet, which is kind of unique to NEAR, you don't always have to necessarily go to websites in I'll give the example people right now. If you use MetaMask and you use it on mobile, you have to go into MetaMask, right, to then use a website that has to connect to your MetaMask wallet. But with NEAR, you don't have to do that because there's a web wallet. And so you can, if you're a project builder, you can use the wallet picker, and then people can use it from wherever they are. So if I'm in my mobile browser, I can use it. If I do use, let's say, a mobile app wallet, I can still use it in there. I can do all of those things, and I'm not restricted. And for a project builder, this to me sounds like a no-brainer to always put in, because it opens up your user base hugely because there's no restriction to it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Here's what I'm hoping. Someone out there make this. I want to know, okay, there's 30 wallets. I want to go to a page that has 10 metrics: security, UX, design, funding, team. I want to see all the things that each web wallet has, because I think for me, I want secure. I want a strong team. I want it to be, do they audit wallets, right?
They do. Yeah, I have to. Yes, absolutely.
I want to see a multiple audit on wallets. This is where I think in a good way, all the stuff that's happened in DeFi across all, Ethereum, Voyager, all this kind of stuff, Three House Capital, all this stuff. I think it's time collectively as a group, we're all starting to be okay, security's real. Now it's not just being hyper kind of degen pirates on the front wave of some tech. Now it's okay, got some money. I want to make sure I'm putting it this isn't 2017 anymore, where I'm downloading wallets willy-nilly on my computer that I can't even turn on anymore.
Right.
This is I want a little bit more thought.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress it enough. If you want mass adoption, you have to figure this piece of it out. And you got to be able to provide a way. I think it's a great idea. If someone wants, there's just a website that shows all that in a nice chart, give it to me, because otherwise, I mean, how does somebody who's never done this before start to feel comfortable?
Or someone who's been doing it for years like us feel comfortable. I don't know how to know if someone's been audited, but I want some sort of checks and balances. I'm not saying centralized. This could be a decentralized dApp that does this in some way. I don't know how. That's the solution. I don't know, but that's what I mean. I want to know,
yeah.
Especially with 30 wallets, people are putting real NEAR on these wallets.
Oh yeah.
So if a wallet, and look what happened to Solana wallet, that several $1 million gone because of some seed phrase thing, right? That's going to happen with 30 wallets. One of them's going to have an exploit.
Absolutely.
Just more. So
that's how it goes. Yeah.
I kind of feel we should make a, those sports, when 32 teams play and you pick winners. We should do that with the wallets. We should do an epic long
tournament, the tournament of wallets.
Tournament.
Yeah. We might be at 64 soon, so we can do a whole big
we should
March Madness. Wallet Madness.
We should wallet madness. Dude, Joe, let's do it. Let's get it together. But I mean, I don't love competing a whole lot with things.
Yeah.
But that could work. All right. Let's move on to like, okay, the spaces in the bear market. We're like getting into a bear market now. Now it's starting to feel like 2018, right? Like, people at first were like, I'm ready for a bear market. I'm like, you've never been in a bear market. Because it's not about the drama of a bear market. It's when the bear market gets boring, is when the bear market gets tough to get through. And you can tell crypto Twitter's dying off. Discords aren't popping off nearly as much. It's really getting quieter. There's a whole lot of it's dead,
Yeah, sure.
And this could be another 12 to 24 months. I mean, the macro environment is bananas right now. Like this, I don't think this doesn't pivot tomorrow. So the reason the reason I bring that up is not to be doom and gloom, but to say that there's still some really good stuff around the ecosystem to get knowledge and build, right? So Joe, NEAR Week has been doing a lot more Twitter Spaces lately and having some really great people on there. I like is that person, how do they say it? Rimberjack? Is that how they say their name?
Rimberjack, yeah. Yep,
she. See, love it. Yeah, she's great. I'm a big fan of Rimberjack. Those Twitter Spaces are good. They're doing some really strong ones where they're giving info.
Yeah.
AVB's podcast.
Great stuff.
Man, I just like I get my tea and I sit and I just listen to AVB go deep with some people. He gets in there. The Kurt Schilling one with Real Birds, that was a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely will enjoy a conspiracy theory. What other stuff have you been like looking around spaces and stuff like that you think is like good for viewers to check out?
Yeah, I mean all the different stuff about the DeFi, I think any one of those where they have different groups coming on talking about different stuff are always good for people to listen to. The spaces too that I like are even just some of the more community focused ones. Like there's been some around artists and things like that, just so people get the whole picture of like what is really going on in the crypto landscape. And so and I would even encourage people, like, if you don't really care about a particular topic, maybe, or you don't think you care about a topic, maybe like pop in for 10 minutes and just see like, oh, maybe there is something actually here that is maybe interesting to me, because sometimes they'll surprise you because you don't always understand what a project really is and what's really happening. And so these spaces have been really great for that.
Exactly. And I was gonna say so Ref Finance is doing some spaces that I like. They get into some DeFi. And then also Matt Lockyer. If you don't follow him because he's constantly in spaces. And his spaces, like today, he did one all about like the wallet, the thing you were talking about earlier, right? Like the wallet selector. He's an interesting guy to follow because he gets into some spaces where, one, he's not afraid to like speak some very clear truth. Like he doesn't get caught up in like the crypto Twitter ethos, right. Drama narrative. He's just like, no, this is how things are made and they're made this way. I helped make them. There's a lot of FUD that doesn't make sense. I appreciate that. So people should check it out. I don't know, Joe, I was also thinking about like NFTs lately.
The only point I would ever make to somebody is just like, look, stop making this out like it's a NEAR issue. Like this is an entire crypto space issue. The two more popular NFT based chains of Solana and Ethereum are going through this. That was the easy way in for a lot of people to crypto, and it's really important to understand that like that's not the only thing that's out there. Speculation is not the only option for crypto. It's not the only use for an NFT. And so this was always going to be how it went. There was no way that any of this was sustainable in any form. It does not mean that NFTs are dead. It doesn't mean that like crypto is dead. It just means that like you got to start being more creative and stop building projects that are a PFP for somebody.
I actually think this NFT, the last year of NFTs has been like super popular or super positive.
Yeah.
Because you basically just pressure tested a non-fungible token.
Sure.
You threw thousands of projects. You watched people figure every way to sort of to grift off of it, to find the angles, see what works, see what doesn't. And the meta changes. There was a time where you could get in early, grind whitelist, dump on people, move on to the next. People get smart, people catch on, and that should never be a long-term. There's no point to have a long-term Ponzi system. However, Now you're starting to see different projects are coming out. They're like, okay, we've got NFTs. Can NFTs be the next sort of way to use in marketing in Web3? Which I'm always, I'm deep in that space trying to figure out how to navigate a marketing stack within Web3. Like how do you market to people when you can't rip all their info off of their phone and all their touch points with cookies?
Sure.
It gets a little trickier.
Yep.
How are companies going to start being able to leverage NFTs as some way to help their already currently successful company add value and use it as a tool that it is?
Sure. I mean, I think we're early to these concepts.
Yeah.
And this is always the way new technologies go, that they're always used for the easiest path at first, right? And just like the thing that mimics something that's in the previous like world type of thing, right? So yeah, there's not much more to say about NFT projects right now, but if you have something creative, show us. I'd love to see it.
Exactly. Cool, Joe. Let me hit a couple like highlight numbers of NEAR. So total volume locked, 500 million, over 500 million, 504 million. I mean, that ranges with the token price, but still pretty stoked on that. NEARCon, less than a month away, people. And Joe and I are going to be there with Ready Layer 1.
Yeah. I think that's going to be really exciting because there are tons of great speakers that are going to be there. There's going to be a lot of really interesting happenings going on. There is going to be a lot of like new things released in the NEAR ecosystem at that time.
Oh yeah.
So that's going to be definitely an exciting week.
Yeah, and also I'm very excited for NEARCon. I think it's going to be a good thing for sure. So Joe, let's what's a couple other topics we want to chat about today?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing for me, that I think is really noteworthy is, especially because it's very NEAR specific, is the testnet release for phase 1 of Nightshade Sharding. So that is going. So what that means is that going to testnet, that new code that's going to be needed for the validators to actually support sharding is going live. So right now, we've talked about it before here, but just in case you don't know and you're new to this. So right now there's a competition going on called Stake Wars. And what Stake Wars is doing is essentially testing out what's called chunk-only producers who are going to essentially become the sharding validators, right? So as you start to add more sharding, then you need these chunk-only producers and validators. So that's going on now. That's its own network right now. It's its own network that everyone's testing on and that the competition is happening on to see how well this setup works. What they just released, though, for the actual proper testnet is the next iteration of the code base to start recognizing the difference between a mainnet validator and a chunk-only producer. And so that's the next step of like, okay, we're preparing to take that group that's on the shardnet and move them to testnet. And then after that goes mainnet, which I think is really it's going to be a really big milestone.
Oh, absolutely. And Joe, you're in Staking Wars. Ready Layer 1 has a validator in Staking Wars.
Yes.
And we're top 50, right?
Yes, we are top 50. Yes.
I mean, in the 30s, or did we even dip into the 20s for a chunk or two?
Yeah, the scoreboard changes because like people are still joining, and so sometimes like when you first join, like your validator should be at like 100%, and like you shoot up the thing, and so it kind of helps you around. But yeah, I mean, but we're in the top 50, and I think they haven't decided how many validators they're going to take, but it could be anywhere from like 100 to 200 validators out of that group that they're going to move up. But regardless of what happens for us, I think the important piece is that like this is happening, like the sharding and all of this stuff is coming to NEAR, and they're meeting their milestones of doing this phased approach. And so we may have a mainnet sharding validation set up by the end of the year.
Awesome, Joe. I'm excited, and this leads me to a point, like really excited for the shardnet. One thing I'm going to bring up that we're going to talk to some marketing people in Web3 in the future, but like I am always interested in what marketing dollars should go towards for a layer 1 versus what dApps, right? So in a decentralized world, who's supposed to market to who and for what? And my belief is that NEAR or any other layer one's main goal right now is to make an amazing layer one. That's it.
Yeah.
They don't need to be marketing to users because they're not even ready for users. They're ready for degens and people who are high risk taker, but they are not ready for like the normies to come on and start getting crypto and flipping around things, right? So to me, like any layer one should just be like, okay, these next few years, we market to devs, getting talent to build the future of Web3. And then dApps are in charge of marketing to bring people to their dApp.
Mm-hmm.
But all that dApp relies on is the amazing foundation that the layer one builds. So,
yeah, look, the best example I can think of, and it's a loose example, but I mean, this is crazy to say that like we're getting to the point where like there's people who like don't remember the beginning of the iPhone, but whatever.
Do you remember? Hold up. Do you remember that first iPhone? I was playing Guitar Hero. Guy walks in, I got a new iPhone. And we were like, whoa.
So the iPhone was super cool. It was very, very different than anything else that had existed before. But that first couple of generations of iPhone didn't actually sell as well as people maybe remember, because it had these limitations, and it did not ship with the App Store. The App Store came later. So when the iPhone took off is when Apple had built enough of an infrastructure in the iPhone to allow developers to be creative and build really cool stuff.
Exactly.
And that made people say, I need to have an iPhone. And that transition. And so I look at an example like that with any blockchain, but especially we're talking about NEAR here. NEAR needs to be in a spot to allow developers, which they're doing, to build really interesting and compelling products so that people then want to come and use that. That's how that cycle works. If you are just attracting users off the bat, then you're going the wrong way, and now you're trying to play catch up, right? And that it's easy to lose those users just as fast as you got them. But when you allow for developers and projects and products to come and build on your network that then drive adoption, that's a much more organic and sustainable way of doing things.
I sometimes think about like users are kind of like throwing kerosene or lighter fluid on a fire. It looks like really bright for a second, but you didn't do anything to like fundamentally make the fire any better. This is my mountain childhood coming out.
Yeah, and look, and NEAR has enough funding that I'm not like they don't have to rush out the door, you know. And so if you believe in crypto and you believe in what NEAR is truly trying to build, which one news we should highlight is that there's an updated website. You should check out the new website.
The new website, man. Oh, good job, SEO optimized. I can see.
And that highlights all the stuff that we're talking about, right? Like it's just like, if you truly believe in the decentralized nature, the ability to, have that freedom and have that ownership and, all of those things, well, that's what NEAR is trying to build and get across. And so, go with, take your time and go with that and focus on that and stop worrying about, floor price of NFTs and the general token price and all that other stuff that will come like that will get there. You got to just keep working towards that infrastructure.
Exactly, man. Joe, this has been a pretty like the news is kind of holding off, I think, till NEARCon, but there was some pretty big news this week. So thank you all for listening. Like and subscribe. Smash that like button. I don't know. We're starting to build our socials. So join if you want and you find value in this. All right. Joe, good talking to you.
Ready Layer 1 is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose.
You should not make any decision, financial investment, trading, or otherwise based on any of the information presented in this podcast without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or financial advisory.